Hello, I'm Gary Wright, and welcome to Conversations with Gary. I was born in the 1950s and grew up in the 60s. And one of the big happenings as a teenager in the 60s was what we would call the British invasion. The British invasion was not anything to do with the military, it had everything to do with music of that day and the coming of the Beatles, the singing group band, to the United States. And they were just one of many that were a part of British culture coming to the United States. And you had groups like not only the Beatles, but the Rolling Stones, the Who, the Kinks, Zombies. And the Beatles, though, far outweighed most of the other groups in popularity, at least during that time period. And their popularity reached a point where one of the members of the Beatles group uh, was said to have said that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus. In an interview in 1966, in which he argued that the public were more infatuated with the band than with Jesus, and that the Christian faith was declining to the extent that it might be outlasted by rock music. And the Beatles, although they were extremely popular, of course, John Lennon is gone, and the Beatles are part of history and one of the most highly recorded bands ever in the history of the world. But really, the most famous rock star was long before that. And that rock star would be the musician King David himself. And of course, he has his own flag, his own star, the Star of David. And throughout the Bible, he is the number one musician of the Bible. Although I've never heard Jesus sing, I've never heard David sing, but thousands heard David sing. And his music was stringed instruments, just like many of those that were a part of the British invasion. Here's one of the things that he says about music and songs. Thank God. Call out his name. Tell the whole world who he, meaning God, is and what God has done. David, the singer, said, sing to God. Play songs for him. Broadcast all his wonders. Revel in his holy name. God seekers, be jubilant. And then he said, study God in his strength. Seek his presence day and night. Remember all the wonders he performed, the miracles and judgments that came out of his. This line right here, seek his presence day and night. To me, that's one of the most important things any human being can possibly do. I feel very honored and privileged to be the son of Eugene Wright. This is my dad here in this picture. And my dad had uh, it was a saying, but it was more than that. It was a value in his life that he practiced daily. This was the sentence he would say. He says, he would say, I try to pray through and touch heaven every day. Now, when he said he wanted to touch heaven every day, that meant he wanted to pray until he actually felt a witness of the Spirit of God to his personal spirit. Now, I lived with him not only at home, but I often went to work with him. He was bivocational. He was stonemason, brick mason during the week. He was a preacher on weekends. And I can tell you something. He tried to do this every day. I can still, as I walk through the house in the morning, going either to school or going with him to work, I would pass him and he would have his big Thompson chain Bible open, laying on a footstool, and he would be knelt there and he'd be reading scripture and talking to the Lord. He almost always talked to the Lord out loud, which sometimes made life kind of interesting. But his goal every day was to know that he really talked to God and he'd heard from God. That's what he called this praying through and touching heaven. All I can tell you is, I don't know that I have met anyone yet in my life who carried the presence of God with him inside of his skin, inside of his body. And, I've noticed as a boy, when he'd get up and preach, there was just kind of a glow around him. And the presence of God was in his life so much that if you weren't right with God, you didn't really want to hang around. And now he and I had this picture. I had my picture taken the same day. Picture here. I don't know if you can tell, but even here, he kind of has a glow about it. And that's the way it was, the presence of God in his life. And he affected people. When people were dying, they'd say, "Give me that little preacher." He wasn't a very big guy, I mean, I'm like 6'4", he was 5'6", and so he wasn't very tall, but he was a big man because God made him big in people's lives. He sought the presence of the Lord. He did that by praying through, at least the effort to pray through, every single day. He wanted to experience the presence of God. He pursued it, passion, intensity, and then he carried God with him the rest of the day. The singer, I think the greatest musician of all time, King David, said, "Seek the presence of God." You and I need to take lessons from what David said and from what my dad practiced. Reach out, experience God every day, pursue it with passion and intensity. And I guarantee you, people around you will begin to notice something. They may not say anything, they may not even know what they're experiencing, but they will experience the presence of God. This is Gary Wright. Thank you for joining me. Feel free to contact me at 800-248-6512, or there's my email address, or you can find me on Facebook. God bless you.